The scene that I'm navigating right now in 3D space is not a 3D scene, it is a 2D image that was converted to 3D with World Labs. They just released a new paper demoing their new tech where they can convert 2D images into 3D spaces and generate all of the missing information outside of that 2D image. In this video, we're going to explore their paper that they released, what you can potentially do with it, and what this potentially means for the future of video and image generation. Let's check it out. All right, so this is the blog post that World Labs just published, kind of teasing a bunch of features that they are working on. This is not public yet. You can't upload your own images, but they did release this demo and features a little bit about how things work. But I got some questions about how this is actually working. But first up, the main thing, you give it an input image, a 2D one-by-one input image as demoed here, and then it generates a navigatable 3D world, and you can go to their website and you can navigate yourself with these 3D worlds. And so I'm using the keyboard to navigate around, and so we can see the image that it generated, but as we pan around, we have a full experience where we can navigate around, and we can move a little bit, but once we move too much, it tells us that we are out of bounds. From messing around with it, it seems like in fictional size, you've got like a 8-foot diameter circle you can kind of move around. We've got some other images here. These are all AI generated images. They said it was either from Midjourney or Ideogram or Flux, and they took the image and generated this 3D space using a combination of depth maps to figure out the actual 3D dimensions or the 3D layout of the space, and generative AI to fill in the pixels around what we don't see in the image that we give it. And this looks like, I don't know if this is, let me see what they're, everyday photos. These are actual just regular images, which also opens up a lot of possibilities with what I've seen happen with photogrammetry, but this does it with one image instead of having to scan an entire scene with hundreds of images. You could potentially take a photo, feed it to World Labs, and now you have a scene that you can navigate and manipulate in 3D space, which is pretty wild. And I gotta say, for the reverse angle of what we're looking at here, seeing the back of the ridge, the trees, is kind of what you would expect to see behind the image. Now, other interesting thing that it can do by extracting all of this data is you can do camera effects. So you can control the depth of field because it knows what's near, what's far. It's building out this depth map so you can adjust your focus, but adjust your focus in 360 space. And get this little tilt shift effect. So it's definitely accurately depicting what is near, what is far. And then you could also do some Jaws style trombone zoom shots while keeping the main subject isolated and having this sort of lens distortion of compressing or expanding your background, which is sort of the same effect you would have if you had a very wide lens versus a very long lens focused on the same subject. And then here it kind of shows what's happening. So here's the depth map of what it is reading when you give it the image and it builds out the 3D generation. It's not quite clear. This is my question. It's not quite clear what's happening. If it's taking the image and then building a 360 panorama of that image of what would be a 360 of what would happen if you're looking around yourself, and then extracting a depth map from that, and then basically merging all those together so that you can kind of navigate around the space. I have toyed with that. I tried to do that a little bit with the Culver Cup project. We have the whole video kind of breaking down how we built that. And I was trying to extract 360 panoramas from an Unreal Engine scene that had no texture. This was a diner scene. And this feature came out after I did the project, but you can then do retexturing in Midjourney. And so this is taking that same scene and giving it a complete retexture and building out a 360 panorama. And if you take this image and load it into a program like Skyglass, you can have it would be 2D, it doesn't have the same depth map, but I suspect if you were clever enough and new enough with Comfy UI, you could do that yourself in Comfy UI and build some sort of scene. Now, obviously what I just described is like 3 different tools, 3 different steps. I don't know if that is what they are doing in World Labs or if there's clearly something else going on under the hood because they're generating the missing pixels from these 2D images that it's given. There's also no notes here about like how much control you have over what is generated. Because if we look here around the scene, there are some things outside of the input image that seem like I wouldn't think that's what would be there. Like this kind of fits, but it's like, well, what if I thought this whole thing was a desert and not that we're in something that sort of looks like Italy or something? So Is there control over what you give it? I would expect you would have some sort of control, but I'm not entirely sure. And then also to kind of demoed some other interesting things that you can do by having this depth data, this sonar effect that applies the effect to the actual object. It knows this because it has the depth data, so it can just add that effect to it. Some accurate lighting, some ripple effect. So it's cool to see the lighting actually kind of go down. This obey the geography of the 3D space. You can animate the 3D space. Okay, so I mean, tools and stuff, tricks that you can do by having this 3D data. Okay, and then going back to my note of like, do you have control over what's generated? So it's taking paintings, which obviously we know what the paintings are, and they have a very finite frame. So like if we're taking Ed Hopper's diner scene, but then we like 360 pan around, a vibrant, bright nightlife is not what I really imagined being on the other side of the street of the diner where we have our quiet people chilling and dining in the middle of the night. But it's cool. I mean, we can see like as I go in here, it's filling in these pixels inside the diner. So it is getting these extra depth pixels generated in the little range that I have. So that's interesting. But again, I'm curious. I mean, I would imagine there's a way like, will we have control over all the other stuff that's generated outside of the image? It's also not quite clear because it's mentioning different models and giving it different models as the starting image. Do you have control over what models then generate the images outside of your starting images? That part is a little fuzzy as well. All right. So what can this mean? How can this be useful? These effects are cool. How can you actually use this? And what does this mean for actual film creation, video creation in the future? So the main thing, huge benefit, is having a consistent 3D space. That's been a challenge, something to work in. Or if you create a scene and then you want to have multiple shots in that scene, you don't want to regenerate the space every single time because it's going to be different. So if you could have the starting foundations of what your scene will be, like if we are in this mansion, hallway, whatever this is, and we have some depth where we can move the camera and have backgrounds. This ties right into virtual production where we can move our camera around and have some perspective and the background shifts accurately. B, if we're doing generation or on a green screen with real people and we have one angle here, we have the reverse angle here, we have other angles here, we have a wide shot back here. We have a consistent 3D space, either generated or based on a real image, like a real location, like here. Sure, some of these pixels are a bit fuzzy, but also imagine that this is in the background of an image and it's a little bit soft to focus. This is not the best image to use for this demo example, but here, even if we had two characters or something here, and you just have this more consistent 3D space to use as a background and film actors in front of it, LED wall, green screen, generated actors. But now we have that consistent 3D space. So this is a huge push forward, and I think generative 3D and other 3D tools is a trend that we're going to see in 2025 because it just gives you so much more control over what your framing an image looks like while keeping things consistent. This is also a lot less of a lift of doing something like Gaussian splat or NeRFs or scene scanning or photogrammetry, which you could probably get if accuracy is more of what you're after, or you're actually trying to capture a space as accurately as possible, then yeah, those tools are going to be great. You're going to take hundreds of photos, you're going to scan, and you're going to capture the detail and accuracy of a space. But if you are doing something run and gun, quicker, or accuracy is not as important, you just need to capture the space, taking a few photos, or if you don't have access to the space anymore, taking a few photos, and then being able to generate a 3D world around a couple of photos is extremely powerful, and there's a lot of potential behind that. Very interesting. It'll be interesting once this is open. We can test it out with some of our own images. Very curious about that. But yeah, kind of questions are just, will you have control over the models of what fills out the rest of the space? Will it give you a 3D version of the scene that you could bring into another tool like Unreal or Blender? What can you do with that? And then also with these effects, is this going to be like they're building a whole app where you can control these effects and animate them and then export a video in the app? Like how expansive is World Labs going with what they want to enable you to do inside their tool set, and then what they're going to give you that will let you expand or go beyond their tool set into other tools. But really interesting to see, really awesome to see this trend in 3D picking up. I think it's going to be the way of 2025, so we're going to see a lot more of that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next episode.